A look at our top story first. United States has once again stood by its vow of as long as it takes. Ukraine is all set to receive its first batch of cluster munitions. It follows months of internal bickering over the deal. So what are these munitions? These munitions are controversial, of course. They are banned by most countries in the world. Even President Joe Biden had to bypass a law prohibiting the production. And this is because of its high failure rate. To understand the controversy with the munitions, we need to understand how they work. Cluster weapons explode in the air over a target, releasing dozens to hundreds of smaller sub-munitions across an area. More than 120 countries see this as inhumane because the unexploded sub-munitions endanger both friendly troops and civilians. The impacts could be felt decades after the end of a conflict. The ones that the US is giving to Ukraine, they are called DPCIMs. Pentagon doesn't use them themselves. They were banned in 2016. So how is Ukraine planning on using this controversial munition? Well, the cluster bombs are already in use in the ongoing war. Both the Ukrainians and the Russians have used these. Ankara has provided Kyiv with these munitions. The aid from Washington comes at a crucial time. There have been growing concerns about Kyiv's lagging counteroffensive. West has been providing its share of weapons, but the arsenal is depleting at an alarming rate. So will the cluster bombs be a game changer? Well, most experts don't think so, but they are an attractive option for commanders.
And brave people.
For more on this, we are joined by Glenn Grant from Riga, Latvia. He is a retired Lieutenant Colonel with the British Army, also former advisor to the Defense Minister of Ukraine and fellow at Baltic Security Foundation. Thank you so much, Glenn, for joining us in this broadcast. My first question to you. We know that cluster munition does pose dangers for years. And can we safely say here that Ukraine is in fact ignoring the safety of its civilians?
No, because most of the places that they're actually going to be fighting in at the moment, there are no civilians. They've long gone. Of course, there are some, because there are always old people who will stay everywhere. But I would say that right at the moment, they don't actually have any choice. I mean, remember that they're up against an army that is much larger than theirs, that is much better resourced than theirs, especially with artillery, and that the other side is actually not only using cluster munitions already, but is also using chemical weapons. So Ukraine is in a you could say a morally difficult place. That if it's not careful, it could actually simply run out of ammunition and lose against a more superior enemy in some places.
Right. Glenn, the 2008 pact prohibiting production, use and stockpiling of cluster munitions has been adopted by over 120 countries, including most NATO members. US, Russia and Ukraine have declined to join. However, with the approval for Ukraine, Washington now seems to be going against the advice of the rights groups. Do you sense a bit of a double standard here on United States' part when it comes to their defense policy?
No, and I don't think it's a double standard on the part of any country. I think the fact is we had peace for a long time. And during that peace, people like human rights groups managed to actually get things like that they didn't want people to use in war. But the fact of the matter is that when you have a war, you have to use every means at your disposal to win. The limit seems to be being nuclear. But you know, you have to fight to win, because if you don't fight to win, you lose, because the other side will always use things like human rights against you. So you've got to be really thoughtful about things like this. If you start limiting weapons, you're endangering the chance of actually giving the other side the strength to beat you.
Right. Interesting points made there, Glenn, and thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.